when you're building out your rifles, an important thing that you're naturally going to start digging into is white lights. And I think that we would both agree, Paul, that it's probably an important thing for people to think about, right?
Definitely. Very important. Probably one of the things that's most talked about now is that's really what you should get after you buy your rifle.
Yep, and we've done videos where we talk about how we would recommend you guys build out rifles or pistol builds, and inevitably the topic of white lights always comes up. So our goal here with this video is to give you guys information. And Paul and I we're in a little bit of a unique situation. Between the two of us, we have a ton of different lights. We definitely don't have every single light on the market.
Every model.
But we have a pretty wide variety. And what we're hoping to do with this video is have some footage where we're kind of comparing different models of lights, but also give you guys some information on how you can choose the white light that's right for you. So before we get into that, why do you think it's important for people to have white lights?
Yeah, so when we think about it with a gun, obviously, there's two things you can be doing with a gun, offense and defense. For both, you need a white light, especially if you're working around anything that's involving night, if you're not using night vision, or like we talked about in early videos with you and Ethan, thermal devices and stuff like that. So that's definitely one of the biggest things you need to understand is that's what you're gonna be using the rifle for, offense or defense, whether you're protecting the house or you're going somewhere that you need to be going and need a light.
Yeah, for sure. And I think of the scenarios and I just look at statistics and realize that there's a lot of bad things that happen at night. And the reality is, even if it's in my own home, now my home's a little bit of a unique scenario. We were kind of talking about this at dinner, where I have certain lights set up certain places so that I could probably get away with not needing a white light in an engagement situation in my house. But the reality is, I want the tool available to be able to see. A lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to dark places, I'm not necessarily wandering into dark alleys. There's certain situations, man, especially with modern white lights, where we could be on the range and there's targets in shade. I just showed you what some of the weapon lights that I have can do in broad daylight. And just because you may not be out in darkness, you may find yourself in darkness. And you need to find the light. And the way you do that is with a weapon light. So
even when there's still that lighting like you're talking about, there's still dark spots when it could look clear as day.
And you know, the cool thing is with the technology increases in lights themselves, you see that getting kind of flowed over to pistol lights as well. And you're seeing a lot of high performance out of pistols. Yeah. And what I like about that is the prevalence of red dots on pistols. Now we have lights that kind of match the capability of shooting far. But that's a little bit of a tangent on the topic.
Which is about time. I'm actually excited that more companies are coming along than like the big three.
For sure. So as we are getting into white lights, it's important to be training with them. I guess from a training standpoint, you would probably agree that it's just like everything else. You get what you put into it, and you have to be putting time behind the light. And that, to me, could be placement of the light, you know, understanding where your pressure pads are, how the light works. It's just like every other piece of gear. Do you have any certain things that you typically tell people to do with white lights as you get out and you're learning them? Is this a dry fire thing?
You're going to have to kind of find out how your gear works for you. So when you set up your rifle, you know, you might have a foregrip here or this sentry strap here and maybe just this piece of pick here on your M-LOK rail. You have to kind of figure out what fits for you, where to put your pressure pads if you're using one. If you're gonna put a weapon light on your gun and you're right-handed, usually they go on the right side or the left side if you just wanna push them kind of with a certain push button. But if you're using a pressure pad, I like it on the right side. It leaves my whole left side of my rail here for my gun or for my hand to basically just have free roam wherever I want. It's not going around certain items and stuff like that.
For sure. And that's one thing that I've done with a lot of trial and error, try to figure out a consistent way to mount my lights on as many platforms as possible. And the reality is, I don't have the budget to go out and buy a Rain full size for every single build of in my arsenal, you know, I just don't. And you might find yourself in that situation too. You might have a primary gun, like this 10.3 inch 5.56 is what I would consider to be a primary gun for me. This is a go-to weapon. So for me, I put my best equipment on this particular gun. and then I try to be as consistent as possible with everything else that I have.
That's exactly how I roll with my rifle.
So then, as far as the lights themselves, I know one of the topics that people really want to know about is brightness. But before we even talk or touch on the topic of brightness, what are you looking for in a quality white light?
Yeah, with all these different lights that me and you were looking at tonight and what we're going to be shooting tomorrow night more and what we've done our own is a lot of, do you want throw? Do you want to take up a lot of volume in certain rooms, like what the Surefire does, in my opinion, well, compared to what your Cloud does really well with actually really throwing a ton of light at that one area. That's what I'm looking for. It's just variety, and I think that all these main lights are really good, and I think that you just kind of have to figure out which one you want for you, your price point, all that good stuff. But that's what I'm looking for, something that's overall reliable, good, decent price point. I mean, they're all pretty up there if you want to get into the good ones, and except, you know, some of that Streamlights and stuff. And I'm kind of getting off topic, but that's what I'm looking for. Reliability, obviously accessibility for what I like, and this may have been different 5 years ago when I first started really messing with this stuff on real guns, but that's what I'm looking for. What are you?
Yeah, for a light, for me, with many of these different guns that I have, they are hunting guns potentially. There's stuff that I would want a light to go really, really far. So the first thing that I'm looking at is obviously a quality build. I want something that is high quality, as high quality as I can afford to purchase. And then I want light that's going to throw. And I've been searching for years for the light that I feel like has a good balance of a center focus beam and then a really wide pattern at the same time. And I think that's important for a defensive firearm like this 10.3, because I want to be able to punch something in the face with as many lumens as somebody will sell me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I just want to hit something like a rocket ship in the face with lumens, but I also want to be able to see around me.
And that's what you're seeing. It's like pretty cool because like someone's dropping a light with this many lumens and this much power, and it's badass, and then someone else dumps another one that's even, and it's just kind of going like this now, which is cool.
The technology is increasing, and in the past, one of the things light manufacturers only focused on was lumens. Now you hear that term candela, and companies are finally focused on, okay, we can put a ton of light out, but there's a difference between just flooding 1,000 lumens and focusing 1,000 lumens. And that's where that candela comes into play. So those are the things that I'm looking for as well. I went with a lot of different lights from the beginning. The Streamlight HLX, solid entry-level light.
I mean, first light I ever owned.
If somebody wants a white light, I think we'd both probably agree with that, for less than 200 bucks, you can get, and I'm referencing that off the top of my head, I could be way off, but I do believe that they're less than 200 bucks. You can get a 1,000 lumen light, comes with a tape switch, pressure pad, and you can rig it up in your gun and have a pretty good light.
Yeah, I think my first weapon light, I know for sure it was on an M&P 15, and it was the Streamlight Pro Tac. It was like 120 bucks at the time.
Yep.
with a pressure pad.
Yeah, that was probably that HLX or whatever. But either way, yeah, you can get into a white light for a very low amount of money. And that's a model that I definitely have run on my builds. And then I also have lights like the Enforce that I held up at the beginning. And I've kind of moved away from lights like this, and we can kind of talk about this. For a period of time in my life of shooting, I liked the Enforce lights like this because there were no wires. And that to me was just nice. And I'll actually give you guys an example here. I have my 7.5-inch 300 blackout, and I'll just slap this guy on. And you can see right away that this has no rail virtually. I mean, the rail space is very limited. So the problem with a gun like this, I wanted a forward grip because 300 blackout's got some punch to it. I felt like it was more controllable, gave me a reference point, but then figuring out where to put a switch was much harder. Now I have run lasers on this gun, I have run other lights off of this pick section over here, which is why this is here. But that's just giving you guys a visual. Enforce makes some lights that are also pretty inexpensive. The Lumen and the Candela is not up to like the mod lights and the Cloud Defensive, or even probably the Surefire. I mean, I'm sure they have some newer ones out there, depending on when you're watching this video. But this is an all polymer kind of construction, so there are some cracks that are forming around a couple places. So generally speaking, build quality, good lenses, I mean, lenses are something that people don't think about a lot.
It's something I don't even think
Can
about
the
a lot.
lens take an impact? And
Yeah.
I feel like what kind of led me to Cloud Defensive for a lot of my different builds here, especially when I saw them testing the owl, which I have over here. They did a heck of a lot of abuse tests on this owl. They were shooting it with sims at like 5 feet or something like that. I mean, you can check their page out. They have a ton of different stuff.
Funny story about that. I was at NRA 2019. I think we talked about that. And I've seen all the videos on YouTube and IG about them. And then I go to their stand or their booth, and there's just like a major, huge flask of beer, and it lights on in there, and it's all jacked up. It's scraped, it's dented. It was pretty cool. That's definitely like that was good that they come out with that, just like.
And that was one of the first lights that I purchased from Cloud Defensive because, again, it checked off my box of having a light with no wires.
Yeah.
The downside of that is how you mount it is limited. You need to have it in a spot where you can press it with a finger right away all the time. So there are limitations to a light like that. But, man, I just want a light that is intuitive to use, built like a tank, throws lumens where I want them.
Mm-hmm.
That really, truly is all what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's almost like not even that complicated. It's just getting into what light you need, but it's really, I don't think it's so complicated as people think it is, that they need to go down a rabbit hole and search for 2 weeks of what light they need to get, you know what I mean? I think someone want to talk about some of the real good ones like we like, the Cloud Defensive. I've got a Surefire here, the Enforce like you talked about, the Streamlights.
Why don't you talk about your setup and then give the why behind your white light?
Yeah, so over here, if you come up, I have a Surefire M600DF. I have like 4 of these things. They're kind of on all my rifles. It's not just because I like this, it's just always what I've had. I've had multiple of them, still use them. As you can see, I have different heads for different bodies, so the tricolor here. What I like about these lights is I think they're decently priced I think they're pretty dang good priced. You could pop them off Amazon so quick, even though I don't say go to Amazon to buy them, but that overnight. I know everybody uses it out there. I know everybody uses it. But I like the Surefires. Obviously, the fact of mounting them is there's tons of mounts out there. Arisakas, all those. The T-Rex mount, which pushes the light actually forward. And that's something that I could talk about real quick that I think is pretty cool. If you see me actually activate my weapon light here with this front mod button here, you can see the little bit of splash on my Surefire can right there. Now, if this light were to be farther back on the rail, that would look about to here on the can. So I'd be losing a lot of light, and I don't want that. So
and you're casting a shadow,
yes,
which gets really strange depending on what you're shooting through.
If I were to pop the can off and just run it that way, I could just bring it back. It's no problem. But I really like the Surefires. One of the other things that I really like is their pressure pad systems, especially like with Mod Light came out with these. There's a couple other people that make some switches for the Surefires. But also this tail cap here, I believe it's the SO9. What's cool about it is it does allow me to activate with the pressure pad, but for some reason if that actually failed, right, I could still go ahead and actually use my weapon light still without that happening compared to the SR07 pressure pad, I believe. So that's just a quick down and dirty why I like the Surefire. I would love to get into some other lights, like I'm really impressed with these Cloud Defensive lights that Jared was showing me and I've shot, and the mod lights of course. But for now, maybe the next rifle light I buy will be probably Cloud Defense, I'm thinking.
Yeah, the ones that I've really been getting into lately, like I already talked about a little bit, are the Rain full size. I feel like for most of my builds, if I can fit a Rain full size on a gun, I tend to like that. I forget the exact candela output of these, but it's crazy. It is just a crazy powerful light. The price point, I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say, depending on the mount that you get, they're in the $400 to $500 range. Yeah. Maybe they start in the high threes. It's an investment. I mean, it's definitely not an inexpensive light. But I like the Cloud Defensive features, as in the fact that the button on the back can function.
Awesome. That's what I talked about earlier.
You can either use the pressure pad. You have a momentary. You have a constant on, or if you had to, even if the wire got cut. That's something that I saw on the Cloud Defensive Instagram page. Even if this wire gets destroyed and cut, that tail pressure pad still works.
That's cool.
So I don't know that there's any other interchangeability in the market with Cloud Defensive at this point. Maybe there is that I don't know about. I know Surefire, I would probably argue, has the most outside support, probably, with other accessories, but they've also probably been around longer than...
Yeah, they do have a lot of stuff.
But as far as lights, the other light that I have chilling over here on Giggles is actually the Rain Micro, which has been a really solid light for me as well. Solid output, same pressure pad for Cloud Offensive, same features on the back. Solid lights. And then as far as what I brought out as well, like we talked about, we have the Inforce WML that I have on my 300 blackout here, which is just a 400 lumen flashlight. Also has IR function as well, but typically I don't really use the IR. Yeah. Now we're running lasers and stuff. I really don't use that function. But I thought it was super neat back in like 2015 when I bought it.
Yeah, and I don't think by any means, if someone has this on their rifle, that this is a bad light to own. It does the job. I mean, shoot. 5-6 years ago, I was watching Frank Proctor YouTube videos, and he had literally like a Surefire that was maybe this big and this skinny. It looked like a Duracell battery. Yeah. It was so small. And that was like back then. And now you look, and these things are like crushing. You know, it's crazy. I'm really pumped up about the lights. They didn't move for a while. They weren't really going anywhere, and then all of a sudden, awesome. And I hope to see a ton of more pistol lights too.
For sure. Yeah, the technology is definitely increasing. You've got a lot of opportunity, a lot of options out there. So guys, hopefully this video was helpful to you. There's definitely a lot of lights. We're not trying to narrow you down into one thing, but these are just a couple things that we think of while we're getting into white lights and we're trying to pick the right one for our rifles. Definitely feel free to message us if you want to. We'll give you our opinion. We've run a lot of different lights. We've got a lot of data that we can share with you guys as well. And hopefully the footage that we're playing in the background here is helpful for you as well, comparing some of these lights so you can get a better feel. That's one thing that if you want more of, you can leave in the comments section. You can let us know. We can do short videos on Instagram if it's helpful to you guys. We definitely just wanted to provide you guys with as much intel as possible so you can make a good decision.
Yeah, we could go on for a whole nother hour.
Or we could go shoot.
Let's go do that.
I think we should go shoot. Guys, catch you in the next one.